Okay, so I want to talk about a trip that I took to Boston, Massachusetts over New Year's and what I noticed while I was there, how it changed the way that I think about presence, creation, and the kind of content that we actually want to make. So I spent New Year's in Boston this year, Boston, Massachusetts, if I have to say it. And technically, it was a work trip. I flew out to produce Apex content for a client, film a series of videos, handle logistics, and then head back home. But if you've ever traveled alone to a city that you don't know very well, especially in the middle of freaking winter, you know that those trips tend to become more than just what's on the calendar. Boston in late December has a very specific feeling to it. Freaking cold. But the buildings are super tall and old, and when you walk through the city, you constantly are surrounded by this sense of history and permanence, which naturally kind of slows you down whether you intend it to or not. The air was freaking frigid in a way that's not subtle. It was sharp and bracing, and the moment that you step outside, you're literally pulled out of your head and into your body. You can see your breath, your hands get cold quickly, and your pace changes almost automatically because you want to run to the next frickin' building before you freeze to death or turn into an ice cube. And between shoots, I walked a lot. Not rushing, not checking my phone constantly, just moving through the city kind of as quickly as possible to get to the next heated zone. And I spent a lot of time in small coffee shops. I spent a lot of time and I ate a lot of meals at a wonderful Italian restaurant on Hanover Street. I think it's called Hanover Street called Lucia's. I do highly recommend it if you're ever over there in the North End. Check that place out. Fantastic gnocchi. But I also ducked into a few local bars and tasted some really great beers. And most of the time, I wasn't trying to do anything productive. Then there were the moments in between the work, the pauses, the conversations that didn't have an agenda, and sharing time with someone who matters to me more than anybody that I can possibly think of that I've ever met in my entire life. Without needing to define anything, by the way, or figure out where it was going. Those moments didn't feel huge at the time. They weren't like overly dramatic. Oftentimes they were just in a small little space, but they stayed with me. And what I started to notice was how rare those kind of moments actually are. Most of us live our lives in a constant state of movement. We're always transitioning from one thing to the next, mentally planning, mentally optimizing, mentally solving. But when you're alone in an unfamiliar city without your routines or with your usual environment, that mental noise quiets down quite a bit, and you're left with just yourself. What's left is whatever you've been carrying inside. That's something that became abundantly clear to me as I was there. We spend so much time thinking that growth comes from doing more, from pushing harder or figuring things out faster, but clarity doesn't usually arrive that way. Clarity shows up when there's space. And this hit me in a very specific way because of the work that I do with content. We tend to think that content starts with equipment or with messaging or strategy or environment, like I always talk about. But what the content people actually respond to doesn't come from any of that first. It comes from awareness. It comes from whether or not you're present enough in your own life to notice what's happening as it's happening. Because the kind of content that we want to make and the kind that people actually feel isn't manufactured. It's translated. And if you're not present in your own experience, well, there's nothing new to translate, or there's nothing real to translate. So that trip reminded me that the moments that shape us the most are usually the ones that we don't plan, the moments between the chaos. And what stood out to me was that I wasn't trying to turn those moments into content. I was there for content, but I wasn't trying to capture them. I was just living them. Oftentimes I'll bring a camera with me and I'll do little videos about all these little places that I go, and more often than not, they just sit on a hard drive somewhere and I never get them edited. But usually I'm always trying to create content. In this case, in Boston, Massachusetts, right after New Year's of 2026, I was just living them. And that's the paradox. The more present I became, the clearer everything felt. And the clearer everything felt, the more aligned my thinking became. And from that place, creating didn't require effort. The trip didn't give me answers. It didn't change my direction overnight, or I really don't know actually what's happening in my life now as a result of that, but it reminded me of something essential. Clarity doesn't come from force, it comes from presence. And if you've been feeling disconnected from your work or uninspired creatively or like you're pushing too hard to make something meaningful happen, it might not be because you're doing something wrong. It might be because you haven't given yourself enough space to actually experience your own life. Because when you slow down enough to be present, when you stop trying to extract meaning from every single waking moment, And when you let the moments in between actually matter, what you create starts to feel real again. And for me, that trip to Boston, Massachusetts was a reminder that the content we want to make, the content that connects, it doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from being who you are.
I think I'm addicted to your hands on my hips.